It's the Jacinto Trail Report from here at Jacinto Peak on Sunday the 16th of February 2025, just after 9 o'clock in the morning. You can see San Bernardino's, San Gorgonio, been there somewhere, and as you can probably tell from the fact that I'm in just a couple of thin layers and wandering around on the peak, it is warm. Currently about 36 degrees Fahrenheit up here, +2 centigrade, and even with a nominal breeze the wind chill's only about -1 centigrade, just below 32. Just a quick update. Snow levels basically unchanged from the last report, probably topped out at about 18 inches here at San Jacinto Peak. It was pretty similar most of the way down to about 9,000 feet, and then it changes dramatically below that because most of those areas, certainly below about 8,500, mainly got rain rather than snow. So for example, somewhere like Saddle Junction, which is PCT mile 179, give or take a bit, there's only about 3 or 4 inches of snow. I can see for PCT hikers planning for the next few weeks, you can see the Desert Divide through in here somewhere, and Apache Peak has a couple of inches at the most. South of Apache's at about 169.5. South of there it's dusting, probably an inch at the most. Apache Peak looks like it might have a sort of a patchy, no pun intended, couple of inches. Expecting very warm temperatures over the next week or 10 days, so that will largely go. There's a decent amount of snow by the time you get to about 175 coming around Red Tuckwitz. Looking at that from here, that might be 6 to 10 inches on that north side of Red Tuckwitz, so miles 175 to 177. That'll take quite a long time to melt. That's going to be around for a few weeks, but we'll keep an eye on that. And then the other thing I wanted to update on was just the trail conditions. I carried spikes and snowshoes today, and you heard that ice falling. I'll talk about that in a minute. Remarkably, I didn't use either. That's partly because my tracks from Friday were still visible, and the snow still has that nice firmness to it. It refroze above about 8,500 feet overnight, so that made it nice. I might put spikes on the way down. I don't necessarily recommend that for other folks. I can see particularly folks who came up from the tram yesterday, up from Long Valley, Round Valley, a lot of them used snowshoes. Snowshoeing conditions are lovely. Although this snow's relatively shallow, it's surprisingly compact. Nice snowshoeing conditions, but by the same token also good for spikes. At the moment I recommend spikes basically everywhere above about 6,000 feet. The worst area, funnily enough, was actually the Devil's Slide trail this morning because most of it had not refrozen, so it was still, obviously it's had a lot more, the lower down you go the more hiker traffic there's been, so it was fairly compacted, pretty icy. And because it hadn't refrozen, it was a little greasy, a little watery on top, so that was actually the slickest area. Once I got above about 8,000 feet, it was pretty nice going. Snow, like I say, is fairly compacted. I only post-holed a couple of times. That's going to get considerably worse over the next week. So as I mentioned, we're expecting warm temperatures well above average at all elevations, including up here. It's probably not going to significantly refreeze up here at San Jacinto Peak for the next, maybe the rest of February, certainly the next week or 10 days. As you heard in the background at one point, I'm trying to find a good example. One warning is because we had so much rain and freezing rain to high elevation, including actually all the way up to here. You can probably see that tree is one example. trees, particularly between about 8,000 and 10,000 feet, have a lot of ice in the tops. This is a problem that's been getting progressively worse in recent years because we get more and more freezing rain to higher and higher elevation. When snow melts off the trees, yeah, it generally just kind of drips off. I mean, you get some chunks falling off, but ice is a different story, and it tends to suddenly just carve out and drop off the trees in big chunks. Some of the chunks I saw today, size of footballs, whether that's an American football or a real football. A lot of stuff that's kind of golf ball size. You could consider a helmet, certainly an option. I probably should have had one today. But something to be conscious of. That problem will dissipate over the course of the next couple of days. Most of it should come down in the next couple of days, but certainly this week something to be aware of. In terms of what trails have been well travelled, Devil's Slide is well travelled. There are tracks going south towards Tuckwit's Peak on the PCT. Don't know if they make it to Tuckwit's Peak. They probably don't, but I'll check on that. There's a lightly travelled but pretty obvious post-hole track all the way up from there on the PCT through Annie's Junction, Wellman Trail and up the Peak Trail. Very well travelled track from the tram through Long Valley, Round Valley up to Wellman Divide. The track from the Peak Trail from Wellman Divide onwards round as far as Miller Peak actually hasn't been that well travelled. Myself and a handful of others, but that's about it. But it's fairly easy to follow. Most folks from the tram looks like they've came the direct route up sort of through Tamarack, the route popularised by Sid Davis, and that emerges out right near Miller Peak. And then in everyone's tracks, including my own, as usual, from there go straight up from the Miller switchback up the East Ridge to San Jacinto Peak. So the upper switchback or two on the Peak Trail haven't been put in, and that's pretty typical in snow conditions. That might change over the course by certainly next weekend because it'll have melted off a fair bit. There are tracks up Deer Springs Trail. Certainly looks like as far as Little Round Valley. I haven't confirmed yet whether they make it through from Little Round Valley to San Jacinto Peak. Most other trails, South Ridge Trail has been relatively well travelled up to Tuckwit's Peak, for example. South Ridge Road is open. The gate's open. The Forest Service Gate is open. The Forest Service Gate at Humber Park is closed. But as usual, there are the 9 legal parking spots just below the gate, or failing that, you can park at Forest Drive, which is just below Humber Park. And that's about it. Beautiful morning up here at San Jacinto Peak, and safe hiking, everyone.